Hello, this is Anna Amelia from North East Animal Rights, doing another one of our Saturday Spotlight interviews. And today we are delighted to welcome Carol Royle, who is an actor and activist. So welcome, Carol, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. Hi.
You're very welcome. So we'll go straight to the questions if that's okay with you. First of all, can you tell us about your vegan journey?
Okay. Well, the vegan journey started as a vegetarian journey, excuse me, because in 1973, I was at drama school, Central in Swiss Cottage, and we used to rehearse quite late. And I came back home one night, and my father, who was sitting in his chair, was at the end of I, Claudius was coming on. And I witnessed, therefore, because it was late in the evening, there was a time politically of butter mountains and beef mountains. Yeah. And this farmer was shooting calves between the eyes and chucking a whole sort of writhing mound to the side. And my sister was already a vegetarian. She was younger than me, 8 years younger than me. And so it was a latent thing, I think, always having been so. But this consolidated it. And I became, from that moment on, a vegetarian. And then, of course, when you become a vegetarian and you start to research and you start to learn, an entire Pandora's box opens for you, doesn't it? And so you start to become aware of vivisection and hunting and the whole lot. So I stayed a vegetarian for a long time, in a time when it was practically impossible to be a vegetarian. And in fact, the Vegan Society approached me at that time, I have to say, and said, would I consider going and doing a debate about veganism? And I said, look, it's so difficult being a vegetarian. And I seem to alienate people wherever I go, because they're all very attacking at this point. I'm going to just stay away from veganism for the time being, but I know that's a hypocrisy. Forgive me, but that's the way it is at the moment for me. However, about 8 years ago, I became a vegan. And it was partly because of the tide that's going on at the moment, this amazing zeitgeist. And it was partly because it was just the zeitgeist, actually. And then what consolidated it was meeting an actress who's become a friend called Wendy Morgan, asking me to become one of the executive producers on a movie that she was writing and directing called Mercy. And that was all about veganism. And that kind of, that was it. So I have been a down and out vegan for about 8 years now.
Yeah. So thank you. It's interesting to hear that so many old school vegans start from being vegetarian. I was vegetarian when I was 14, and exactly the same sort of thing, because there's not so much, it's all over social media now, but at the time there was no such thing as social media. So you kind of thought you're doing the right thing. I always say now that vegetarianism is not enough, but at the time it was actually quite a big step, wasn't it?
Well, I used to go out to dinner quite a lot, and it would drive people crazy that I was fiddling with the menu and looking for something that was vegetarian. If I had then said to the waiter, can you please make sure that those peas haven't been done in butter? I think people would have just got up and walked away from me. And for me anyway, at that time, and indeed now, of course, it is to try to get as many people on board as possible who can be sympathetic to the cause and understand it. And if you go straight in, then they just think you, in those days anyway, they thought you were wacky, and they thought you were a silly woman, and they thought you were being over sentimental and emotional. All of the things now that you're not even allowed to say in terms of just being a sentimental woman, because then you're becoming chauvinistic as well. So there was a whole package of problems tied up with being a vegetarian in the 70s, 80s, and indeed 90s.
I remember, I think probably some of the younger vegans, the ones who were sort of vegan more recently, they won't appreciate how difficult it was when even being vegetarian. You had to ring, if you're going out for food, you'd have to ring ahead. That's what I would do, ring ahead and tell them I was vegetarian, and you'd get vegetable lasagna or cauliflower cheese, and that was pretty much it. Where now, you can just go out anyway, even the steakhouses will have a vegetarian or vegan option now. So it's much more simple.
Well, I like to think, I like to think, sorry, I'm interrupting you. I like to think that I might have been a small part of its emancipation, because very quickly I'll tell you a story how we took my father-in-law out to a restaurant to celebrate his birthday. He was a strict non-vegetarian, and so was my mother-in-law. My husband, I think, was on side by that time. And we went to Leith's, Prue Leith's, who now, she wasn't, you know, the television figure that she is now at that time, but we went to Leith's. Now, I knew of her because I had one or two of her recipe books, and I used to turn them into vegetarian recipes, you know, if it was such and such, you substitute vegetarian things. But I was very upset to see that there really wasn't anything at that time on her menu. So I wrote to her afterwards and I said, look, we had a great night. My father-in-law enjoyed himself. It was his birthday. I really admire you for your business, your cookery schools, your recipes, which I transpose into vegetarian. But there was nothing for my husband and me that night. And within a few short days, the doorbell rang. This is all by post in those days, don't forget. We didn't have computers, mobile phones and stuff. This is letters. Somebody rang at the doorbell and it was a postman holding a yard, you know, a yard of mint chocolates. And it was a present from Prue Leith by way of an apology, and saying that from there onwards she was going to create and indeed include in her restaurants a vegetarian menu. So it was a way off veganism at that time, but it was a start.
Yes,
and if by any chance she ever sees this, thank you, Prue.
I'll make sure she does. So you've had a long and varied career. You've appeared in all sorts of things, you know, things which we all know. You do with The Bill, Casualty, Grain Chill, Professionals, which is one of my favourites, Life Without George, Endeavour as well, which is one of my husband's favourites. You've also done theatre. You've done the Carol King musical, which we absolutely loved. Is there a particular form of dramatic arts which you enjoy or you prefer, or are you happy just mixing it up?
Well, these days I'm rather happy to get a job, actually. No, I love it all. I really do. But they all contain the absolute same, which is integrity and truth and being the character, whether it is a musical or a sitcom or a Shakespeare or a television drama, a Chekhov. It doesn't matter what it is. The thing that is the same throughout the thread is truth, integrity, and being the character. But of course, the different mediums they have different needs. On stage, you have an audience that you're talking to, and they're a bit way off. On television, the camera is like here. So everything is the same, but so much smaller, so much more naturalistic. And you have to know just how big you can go and how small you must take it and all that. But I don't think I have a favorite. There is nothing quite like coming off stage at the end of a show that you feel has gone well. There's nothing quite like that in terms of the adrenaline. There was an actor at the RSC once who was doing a first night. I wasn't in it. I was watching it. And afterwards he came off and he said, you know, the amount of adrenaline that you produce on a first night is equivalent to a car accident. You having a car accident. And it's true, but luckily, of course, you don't get injured in quite the same way. But that's what it feels like. And of course, when it goes well, to have that amount of adrenaline afterwards, it's why actors stay awake so long. It's why I go to bed at 2 o'clock every morning. I can't get out of the habit of being awake and alert at night. That's why when you come to do filming, you know, when I was doing the storyline on Casualty, for example, and you have to wake up at 4:30 or something, when you're a late night person like me, that is really difficult, difficult. But it's all great, and I love it all.
So what's been the proudest moment of your career so far?
I don't think there's been a proudest moment. I think that pride, for me anyway, comes from, as I mentioned to you, really, coming off stage, having felt, you can't please everybody all the time, obviously, having the feeling that the audience has got it. They have enjoyed it. You've done your best. You feel that you've done okay. and you come off and you feel elated, and that gives one a sense of satisfaction, and I suppose you could call it pride. I think the only time that I can possibly use that word is regarding what I just mentioned, the Casualty storyline. I've been in Casualty a few times, actually. I think I played, I don't know, 5 different characters, but on one occasion I did a storyline which lasted a few months, and it was a woman who was suffering from Huntington's disease, Huntington's chorea. And I was the mum of 2 of the regular boys, the doctors, Cal and Ethan. And somebody at the Beeb got in touch with me and said, Carol, have a look at Facebook. I wasn't on Facebook at the time. Have a look at Facebook for the feedback. And a lot of people from the Huntington's disease community were posting. And I was very, very humbled, I think, by the way that they were responding to my performance. And the pride therefore came from the fact that I felt like I had done something in such a way as those very people who knew all about it were appreciating the performance, and that it was doing something to highlight what is actually a little known or understood disease. So I think probably in my career, that's the only point that I can actually talk about a pride.
Yeah. So I can see behind you, there's a photograph of a lovely little dog. So can you tell me about the animals in your life at the moment?
At the moment, well, we are dogless at the moment.
No.
We, from the point when we moved into our house, when my husband and I were young, we've had dogs, and our children have always had dogs. And before that, my parents always had dogs. So my parents had rescues. My mom, who was a makeup artist, was working on Last of the Mohicans at one point, and in some, forest deep in wherever it was she was filming. And there was a stray dog. And my mother adopted it, having realized that it was on its own. A blue tick hound, they're called over there, I believe. I don't really know what the English version of that would be. Anyway, she put it into quarantine, and I went and visited it constantly whilst she was finishing off the movie. And then they called her Lady, and she was in the family over here in England thereafter. And she had Springer Spaniels, and she had terriers. She had a whole host of them. We had a setter called Rupert, who was joined by a little Heinz 57 called Nicola, who was a rescue. And then we lost Rupert at the age of 14 and a half, which was pretty good because he was enormous. And then we got the twins, James and Janet, and that's James behind me. So we had 3, Nicola, James and Janet. And then we lost Nicola because she was ancient by then, about 16. So we just had James and Janet, and then we lost Janet when she was about 13 or so, and finally we lost James, and he was also 16, I think, and because then the children were grown up, and because I do things like go off on tour and stuff. When you've got kids, of course, you're always going to have somebody at home, aren't you? There's always going to be you or a family member or an au pair or something. And suddenly we were on our own because the kids were grown up. So we haven't had one again. But my son has just got a rescue from Romania called Jason. And so he is the new addition to the family. He's just gorgeous. He's got a lot of baggage, but he's very, very loving. He doesn't like being washed, and he doesn't like getting in a car, but we must conquer those things. And so we have a family dog again, which is nice.
Good. So is there an area of animal rights which you feel a particular affinity with? You mentioned vivisection before, and obviously you've got an interest in dogs, but is there, for me, it's dairy and eggs. So is there anything which you feel particular affinity with?
I don't think cruelty has any hierarchy, and consequently, as I said, when you become a vegetarian and the research suddenly starts pouring at you, you become aware of everything. So having just stopped because I didn't want to eat meat, I then became aware of all of the industries, despite the fact that I was hypocritical enough not to become a vegan straight away, but we've discussed how very difficult that was in those days. Crumbs, I couldn't even, you couldn't even eat a vegetarian meal sometimes, it was so difficult. So of course I became aware of the industries, factory farming for money, the sheer horror of what the creatures go through, possibly being separated from their offspring at all times, seeing their offspring taken away from them at birth. Vivisection is something that I immediately became involved in. And in 73 or thereabouts, I therefore became associated with a number of charities such as Animal Aid, Dr. Hadwin's Trust, as I think it was then called, it's now called Animal Free Research, and numerous others. Respect and Mark Glover was always very close to my heart. And now Safer Medicines Trust, all those charities, 4 of which I'm a patron now. And so, yes, all of that information came at me straight away, and I was trying to deal with it all. And as I mentioned before, in those days, it was just about writing letters. We didn't have the new young people who are carrying the baton for us and from us, who give us this amazing facility to sign petitions left, right and centre, send emails just like that to our MPs. In those days, it was the laborious thing of writing letters to newspapers and stuff. So honestly, it was everything that suddenly I was quite overwhelmed by it. In fact, you know, I used to get all the stuff through the doors, and I used to get really very depressed. And they used to, when they used to come through the door, the things that had graphic images were sometimes in a little black envelope. And my husband, I later found out, used to hide those because he knew that it would put me in a depression for the rest of the day. But you almost eventually become, I wouldn't say immune, we never become immune, but there is a part of you, I don't think I can ever look at a bullfight, you know, that's towards the end. I literally can't. So when I'm dealing with stuff on the computer these days, I do that. When I'm signing petitions and reading stuff, so that I can't see the images, because it affects me so much. So it was everything, actually.
I think it's a very valid point you make there. I mean, we are obviously already vegan, we're already animal rights activists, so we already know the horrors which go on, and really the images are for those who don't know what goes on. It's to kind of try to connect with them, for them to understand what we already see. I remember when I was talking to Julie Galati, she said that she had this kind of like epiphany where she understood all of a sudden what happened, and she just thought that if she told everyone in the world, you know, all her family and friends, what she was seeing, that they would see it exactly the same as her, and she was just so upset and disappointed that they didn't see that. So it's a similar sort of thing, like, you know, I know the envelopes you're talking about, when we get them from we've had them from the RSPCA, from Animal Aid, from British Union for Abolition of Vivisection, as it was at the time, when they used to send the little black envelopes, and you could choose to open them or not. But I think those envelopes are better passed on to people who test on animals, who use stuff which is not cruelty free, who eat meat, because this is what they are paying for. That's right. And in fact, I know Juliet, before she had Viva, she came and interviewed me, actually, and this whole thing about graphic stuff, funnily enough, I was at an annual AGM of the League Against Cruel Sports yesterday, and I was chatting to a few people, and we were in fact, I was talking to Ian Green of Animal Aid, who was there, and we were talking about the trouble one has of trying to get people to understand the abhorrence of the whole thing, whilst at the same time not trying to frighten them off by the pure horror of it all. And that's really a bit like I was saying in the beginning, I couldn't become a vegan because I would frighten too many people off, because being a vegetarian was hard enough. And I'm one of the executive producers on a movie called Mercy, which Wendy Morgan, the actress, has written, directed, edited, appeared in, and is now putting it round on festivals and stuff. And what she's cleverly done, I'm not saying that it's without shock, because she's used a lot of the undercover footage that Animal Aid and Compassion in World Farming and people have supplied for her, but she's done it in such a way as makes it actually, I think, acceptable for people who are not of the initiated. And indeed, if you are initiated and you kind of know what's coming up again, you can sort of go like this. She's done it very cleverly, so watch out for that. It's on the festival circuit. You know, we've got about 6 or 7 laurels now, and
please God, it's going to go out there and more people will be able to watch it and be able to watch it from the point of view there is some raw footage there, but there's not, it's inside an abattoir with people being cruel and unkind, but not during the actual slaughter process. Actually, there's people personifying the animals. You see some raw footage, which is the animals. And then you see footage, which is people personifying the animals. And that is what I think makes it more, not acceptable, but more approachable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've all seen, some, within all of the films and the stuff, like Seaspiracy and Dominion and Land of Hope and Glory, and Earthlings as well. I mean, I know Earthlings is quite old now, but within all of those, they all have different approaches. It's all about the same sort of subject, about animal cruelty. And then you have films like Game Changers, which is purely kind of like, in the theory, it was created to just debunk all of the health myths around veganism. And obviously they can't debunk it, because it obviously is quite, if it's done properly, it's a quite healthy lifestyle. And I know that it's kind of, it is kind of creating a route into veganism. And it doesn't matter, I always say, it doesn't matter how you get into veganism, because when you see what happens to the animals, you'll stay vegan for the animals. It could be you get into it for health, for environmental reasons. We have these ongoing debates in our group about how you can't be an environmentalist if you're eating animals. And that's something which is, it's a good way to get into, but you must stay vegan for the animals.
Yes. Well, everything is kind of baby steps, isn't it? I mean, the thing is that as I've mentioned, I think briefly before, when I started out, you were heralded as a kind of over sentimental woman or person. But of course, I was a woman and took it as an insult. But you still have to realize that everything is by increments. And now that it is a political topic, you can talk about it intelligently without people down crying you for being over sentimental, because it is now a political point of view. We're talking about climate and not just the sentience of animals, although luckily now, thank God, we are talking about sentience. But I was talking to somebody at this reception yesterday, and they were saying, in terms of certain cultures, that they think that it is right to be able to eat their, let's say, horses, because it would almost be immoral not to use them in that way, these horses having worked for them all their lives. And I think, if I understood the point that was being made, it was that they were making these people abroad, I can't remember what part of the world she was talking about, from their point of view, because they are in the position that they are in, which is not in our lucky position, they have to exploit these animals in the best way that they can. And I said, well, I totally understand it from a poverty point of view, and I'm in no position to argue about that, am I? But in an ethical point of view, it's just a point of ethics as to whether it's right to eat anything like that in the first place, or exploit it as a work tool in the first place. So what we have to strive towards at this point, I would hazard, is to enable these people not to have to use those creatures for exploitation in any means. In other words, we have to help them in terms of the situation of their financial and poverty straits. We have to help them in that degree, not help them by providing them with animals that they then will have to use as tools, and then will eat them potentially when that animal is worthless as a tool. But it's a subject that I am not intelligent on, and so I only hazard that which was a knee-jerk reaction to what we were talking about.
I know the Animal Save movement over in Canada, we support the Northeast Animal Save. They do campaigns about not gifting animals for Christmas presents and that sort of thing, because just what you've said there, it's kind of enabling them to exploit the animals rather than enabling them to manage without the animals.
Yes, which is what we should be doing. Is what we should. Our governments, all of the governments in the West, should be enabling people to be able to manage without the exploitation of animals in a perfect world.
So final question then. So what would be your dream role if you had, if you were able to write something, or if you were able to, have somebody write something for you, what's your dream role?
Well, again, I'm sorry to be sort of vacant on this, but I don't have a dream role. I would love to do some more Shakespeare before I die. I would love to do some more of the classics. The sad thing about becoming older is that you have people who really know you and trust you, and you work well as a team, for your life. And there are directors who have enabled me to do the kind of work that I've loved. And then they pass away, and you sort of look around for somebody who might be able to employ you in the same way. And they're not there anymore. This is part of the ghastly thing of getting older. But in the absence of a number of directors who enabled me to do those wonderful, wonderful Shakespearean and dramatic roles, those are the ones that I would seek to do again. I've always rather hankered after playing a sleuth when I was young. Never happened. I got to play a lawyer once, but I never got to play a sleuth. So that would be great fun.
Maybe a sleuth, sort of undercover investigations in farms and animal stuff, and kind of like combine everything together.
If we could have a fictional thing based on fact in that department, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, it would.
I remember Bob Peck, bless his heart. He did a thing about bovine. What was it? BHS?
BSE, the bovine.
BSE?
Yeah.
Yes, fat. And he did a fiction, but it was absolutely based on truth.
Yeah.
And he was an undercover, I think, a journalist or something. And I thought, this is fantastic because it's showing the truth.
Yeah.
We need a lot of people who are brave enough to write fictional plays, TV plays that are based on absolute truth. And I could ream off a load of stuff here that I would like to see those done on, but I would probably be arrested.
Well, on that note, so we're running out of time now. So I would like to just say thank you very much for giving me your time. It's been really, really lovely to talk to you. I really, really appreciate it. I know you're very, very busy, and good luck with the next project and whatever you do in the future as well.
Thank you.
We'll keep on watching you and seeing how you're getting on. So I'm going to sign off now. So this is Anna Amelia from Northeast Animal Rights saying thank you very much to Carol Royle for being with us today, and thank you and goodbye.
Bye, everybody.